History in an Hour. Black History by Rupert Colley. Read by Jonathan Keeble. Introduction. This e-book cannot by definition be comprehensive. Even as a summary, there is much that has to be excluded, and such exclusions are naturally subjective. However, this book aims to provide the reader with an introduction to the powerful and dramatic history that is loosely termed Black History. The study of Black history in the West has to be seen primarily in the context of American history. It was in the USA, where all men are created equal, that slavery and the fight for civil rights had its most profound effect. Freedom and the rights of the individual formed the basis of the Declaration of Independence. But Thomas Jefferson, the composer of the Declaration, was himself an owner of slaves, 200 of them at any one time, and 600 over the course of his life. George Washington, the first President of the United States, likewise owned slaves, as did most of his immediate successors. The 13 British colonies of North America that had fought for and won their freedom in 1776 had felt enslaved by the British, but saw no contradiction that at the point of independence no less than 18% of their number were slaves. The anti-slavery voice of the northern states grew stronger, and in 1780 Pennsylvania became the first state to abolish slavery within its borders. More northern states were to follow, but the Southerners, dependent as they were on slavery, held their position. So polarized were the North and South, so divided on this one central fundamental issue, that the country went to war with itself. The result, the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, brought about the end of slavery and the emancipation of America's vast African-American population. But the end of the American Civil War in 1865 and the liberation of the slaves, although a triumph, was merely the end of the first chapter in American black history. Ahead lay a struggle of epic proportions as African Americans fought deep-seated discrimination, violence, and intimidation to assert their political, cultural, and economic identity, a story that for many concluded with the election in 2008 of America's first black president. This, in an hour, is the story of black history. Slavery, the peculiar institution. 17th-century British North America needed labor. Tobacco, rice, and indigo were potentially profitable industries, but the manufacturers lacked the manpower to work the vast fields efficiently. The transatlantic slave trade, already delivering slaves from West Africa to the European colonies in the West Indies, began providing slaves to the New World, the first arriving in Jamestown, Virginia, in 1619. From Senegal, in the northern reaches of West Africa, to Angola in the south, African rulers such as the Yoruba kingdom of Oyo on the Guinea coast and the leaders of Dahomey, modern-day Benin, built successful kingdoms by delivering hordes of their fellow Africans to the European and North American traders. The traders sailed for Africa and bartered with the local African slave merchants, exchanging textiles, armory, luxuries, and alcohol for slaves. The slaves were local criminals, misfits, debtors, or increasingly those randomly kidnapped from neighboring tribes. The journey across the Atlantic lasted several weeks and was a desperate passage. Frightened Africans, torn from home and family, were crammed into the bowels of a ship where overcrowding, lack of ventilation, insufficient nutrition, minimal toilet facilities, and constant seasickness made for appalling conditions. For the white merchants, very aware of how numerically outnumbered they were, mutiny remained a constant fear, necessitating brutal means to keep their cargo in check. Manacled and beaten, the slaves cowered. But it was disease, particularly dysentery, which posed the greatest threat. Once fully at sea, the slaves were allowed time on deck to help minimize the threat. Those showing even the smallest symptom of contamination were immediately thrown overboard. Commercial
Sample complete. Ready to continue?